Good morning.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, with regards to what Whoopi Goldberg said on ABC, she said that it was a hate crime. Judaism, whether we like it or not, or whether it's...
Hold on.
She
says it wasn't. She says it wasn't about race. Is the key? I think.
Yes, because Judaism isn't a race. The Jewish, it's a faith, just like Islam.
No.
Like you're going to say, you've got the Catholic faith or Christian faith.
Hold on. If you look at the very fundamental basics of what Adolf Hitler was trying to achieve, the Aryan race was the master race, so all other races, whether it be Jewish people, gypsies, they were all inferior races, they were treated like vermin, and they were to be exterminated. It was all about...
Okay, with all due respect, what exactly does the Jew... Okay, what does Judaism say? Judaism say we are...
No, never mind what Judaism says. Let's focus on... No. I want to focus on Whoopi Goldberg says. How do you respond to that when... I think even people with a very basic knowledge of history know that Adolf Hitler believed in this ridiculous idea of a master race. That surely tells you...
Is that not the same as Zionism? We are a master race chosen by God?
Oh, okay. Let me bring someone else in to discuss this. Richard in Manchester, what would you say to Steve? Richard, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Anybody that has ever studied Hitlerian Germany, prior to the war, but the whole growth of it, intrinsic to Nazism, in fact, fundamental, crucial to it, is their racial policy. It's their policy of a master race, the Germans, a purified race, which must remain pure by ethnically cleansing any other racial minorities, of which the Jews were particularly targeted, and of which the Jews suffered numerically the most, but also included blacks, gypsies, Roma, and so on and so forth. And also the gentleman who's speaking on the other line,
who's listening now,
who's talking about Jews being a religion and Jews not being a nationality or a race. The Jewish people were very clearly identified as a race. In fact, if you look in Nazi literature, and if you look at papers of people entering a concentration camp, and I've seen these papers, original papers, they took measurements of the length of the nose, the distance between the eyes. They took a whole series of measurements to set out what the Jewish race was.
Let's get Steve back in. Steve?
Similar to things that they did with regard to the bell curve, which was the theory that the Jews were more of higher intelligence, etc., than African people especially. But what I said and what I will stick to is Judaism is a faith, just like Islam, just like Catholic, just like Methodist. It's a faith. And furthermore, one thing I would really like to say, with regard to this anti-Semitism, Arabs are Semites as well.
Well, let's let Richard respond to those points. Lastly, Richard.
Yeah, I can hear the sub-narrative of what this gentleman is saying. He's obviously got a very clear sub-narrative with regard to the Middle East, with regard to the conflict between Israel.
Do you have a sub-narrative, Steve?
Listen, I have facts. And whatever he says with regards to the Nazis measuring Jews' noses, come on. Are you serious?
What do you?
I actually am very upset to hear the tone of the language of this other gentleman. Because if you allow me to, I listen to you respectfully.
Let's Richard, Steve. I will give you another chance, Richard. Richard.
Yeah. The thing is, you are blinded by what you think is the relationship between Jews and non-Jews, and where you get intelligence and superior intelligence from. That also tells me, because those are the sort of racial tropes that people have. I think you need to examine your own morality very carefully.
Let's get Steve back into the conversation. Steve.
Yeah. You need to read the bell curve, my friend, and you need to read a lot of Jewish. There's a book called A Little History of the World, which was introduced to me by a Jewish friend of mine, and I was reading this book called A Little History of the World. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Most Jewish people are, because they say it's something that they give to all of their children. The Little History of the World depicts Africans as slaves. The only contribution that Africans have made in the history of the world is depicted as we are slaves. Is that not some kind of racism?
Let's leave it there. Richard, thank you. Steve, thank you for your views, because we're going into another... I want to try and limit, if we can, to what's happened as regards the two star presenters of two different shows on two different networks. Thank you for your input even, gents. Sam in Muswell Hill. Sam, you're on the radio. Morning.
Hi, Nick. Yeah, first of all, on the Whoopi Goldberg thing, I was very surprised because I actually worked on a summer camp in upstate New York for 3 years, and that camp was started by migrants who'd fled from Eastern Europe. From Nazism, and Yiddish was a language that was predominantly spoken in that camp.
Was it in the Catskills? Was it in the Catskills?
Full of Holocaust survivors. Say again?
Was it in the Catskills, the camp?
It was near Poughkeepsie in upstate New York, so quite near the Catskills. And a couple of years ago, people can Google this, Whoopi Goldberg visited the camp, and she did a whole segment on how wonderful it was and how they were retaining all the Jewish culture.
Yes.
So I'm not defending Whoopi. I think what she said was completely wrong and very offensive to a lot of people, including me. But I do think that in broader society, including me in London, growing up with people, there is this confusion, and there is this Jews can walk around. I can walk around North London. Nobody would know I was Jewish. I'm not a religious person,
right.
And so there is that confusion, and there is the education that's required, and the roots of the argument about Judaism and race. The strongest argument is yes that Hitler use the race against us, but also look at Spain and Portugal. I'm moments away from getting my Portuguese citizenship because the Spanish and the Portuguese chucked us out, and the Inquisition as well, not just the Nazis.
Okay, Whoopi Goldberg, 2 weeks suspension, too much, too little? What would you say? About right? What would you say?
I agree with the point about cancel culture. I don't think everybody should be going out for her. She needs to be fired. She needs to never have a career again. I think it's much more powerful for Whoopi to be educated, for her to come out and say what she's learned during these 2 weeks, and potentially to get her job back. Because
okay, Sam, thank you. Only finishing to get more people on. Thank you. Shimon's in Farringdon. You're on the radio. Good morning, Shimon.
Hi, Nick. Good morning. Good morning. I wanted to say that I think this whole debate about Whoopi Goldberg is ridiculous, somewhat embarrassing, and I can't subscribe to this Jews. I'm a Jew, obviously, desperately to be victims. I'm not a victim. Whoopi Goldberg made a...
In what way? Sorry, do you think... No, I just want to clarify. You think Jewish people are desperately victims in the Whoopi Goldberg row?
Yes, absolutely. Whoopi Goldberg made a mistake, a historical mistake. It was pointed out to her. She corrected it, and she apologized. Thank you very much. Move on. This is nonsense that somebody who made a historical mistake has to be cancelled. It's like, we're bigger than that. People make mistakes. She learned. She apologized. Moved on. Why have we got to make a whole big drama about this? It feels a desperation to be a victim. And leave her alone. She's made a great contribution. She's corrected herself and apologised. Let's move on.
And I will. Shimon, thank you. Michael in Manchester, do you agree with Shimon? Let's move on. She has apologised.
Well, to a degree. Look, Nick, you're absolutely right when you said that it was the Nazis that characterised the Jews as a race. That was part of their racial theory, which started in the 19th century, and they built upon it, didn't they? Mm-hmm. But your first call, I think it was Steve, when he said Judaism is religion. That is true. Mm-hmm. We Jews refer to ourselves as Am Yisrael, which means the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. So the point I'd like to make is just because the Nazis have cast us as a race doesn't mean we're a race, right? There are black Jews, there are brown Jews. You see that in Israel more than here, okay? Whoopi Goldberg, ignorant statement. I'm reminded of David Baddiel's book, Jews Don't Count, if you've read it. Somehow anti-Semitism is of less importance than white on black racism, but there you go.
And I'm sorry, before I let you go, 2 weeks suspension then. I just need your view on that.
Yeah, as long as she reads up on the history and she understands where she went wrong, I'd be happy with that.
All right, thank you for that, Michael. Dan in Southfields. Dan, your reaction? 2 weeks suspension?
Hi, Nick.
Hello.
Well, I really thought I was sticking my head on the block here as someone that isn't of the Jewish faith, and it's lovely to actually hear people of the Jewish faith come to her defence and be sensible about this, because that's really what I wanted to say. Is we're all learning here. I'm certainly learning a lot this morning. I'm embarrassed to say.
Right.
And
what have you learned this morning?
Well, my first reaction was in principle I can kind of. I always try and see what people are saying when these things blow up and try and actually hear what they said rather than just take out the sometimes just reported little bit of it. So I listened to what she said, and then I thought, okay, it's clumsy, but I kind of think I get what she was trying to say.
Right.
And I guess that's where my point is that, irrespective of whether people are celebrities or whatever else, they sometimes do say things just because they're ignorant or they don't really understand something.
True. Yeah.
And then you correct them. And then they say, okay, great, I've been educated. But if you continue down the line of, well, you said something wrong, therefore you must be cancelled, I don't know where that leads to, you know, where people are just scared to talk, and people are, you know, and it's not about, as I say, it's not about kind of defending, you know, people's right to say anything, but I just sort of, I think it can sometimes go a bit too far.
Thanks, Dan. More comments coming on this. Also coming up after the news, the football team that you follow. Could you support them in a decision to buy clearly a very gifted player who also happens to be a rapist? That is the row going on at Raith Rovers after one player has been signed who has been convicted in a civil case of rape. Here's Raith Rovers supporter speaking outside